People are fleeing Britain. To be more specific, British citizens are getting out of the country en masse. They're just giving up on this country. And I know that might sound a little bit strange because the net migration figures are still high, and I'll come on to talk about that, but this really is happening. And the government and the Office for National Statistics did not expect it. They predicted that last year 77,000 British citizens would leave, but in reality, it was over 250,000. So what's going on? Who is leaving? Why are they leaving? And just how bad is this? Let's start by looking at who exactly is leaving. Now, I'm sure some of the people who are going have British passports, but they're not actually ethnically British. They've got a British passport because we give them out like Skittles, but they also have another passport, probably from their ancestral homeland. And frankly, I'm not going to waste really any time thinking about why they're leaving. That's up to them, and I don't particularly care. But there will, at the same time, be a lot of English, Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish people who are choosing to leave their ancestral homeland. Now, who is that going to be in the first instance? Well, it's going to be the people who are most mobile. That's people who have money or a particular skill set, or they have a high income. People like Alfie.
Well, I'm seeing it obviously from a different view now because I'm outside the UK looking in. And it seems like a horror story that's just getting to a sequel because they're not supporting business. And worst of all, they're not supporting the middle-class workers.
Now, Alfie, in that interview, describes himself as a businessman, and I don't know exactly what he does, but presumably he's got quite a bit of money. And you didn't see it in the specific segment I showed, but his location is listed as Monaco. And this is something I've raised on this channel before. If you've got £50 million, why would you stay in this high-tax, low-trust Britain when you could go and live in Monaco? You would do that, right? It makes sense. It's a better quality of life. So we'll lose the wealthy first. We'll lose the rich. In fact, that's already happening. It's estimated that Britain is going to lose 16,500 millionaires this year alone, which is second only to China. So we're seeing a massive exodus of wealth out of this country, and that's really bad. Millionaires, even if you're a socialist or a Green Party supporter or a welfarist, millionaires are a fantastic thing to have in your country because they pay a lot of tax and they don't burden the state. They don't use the NHS. They have private healthcare. They don't use the state school system. They put their kids in private schools. So you can use them as a tax pig and get money out of them, but they actually cost very little to the state. I mean, the more millionaires you have in your country, the better, believe me. At the same time, there will be people who aren't millionaires, but who are getting there. Right? People who earn a lot of money. Congratulations to them, because in this country, we don't celebrate success anymore. As soon as you become successful, you're just a pig for the government to extract capital out of. But let's say you've got a high income. Well, the top 1% of earners, so working earners in this country, pay 30% of the income tax. The top 1% are paying 30% of the income tax. Think about that. The top 10% are paying 60% of the income tax. You cannot keep the welfare state running if you lose those people. It simply won't work. You can't have that. They are paying for everything. And if you make those people leave, the welfare state, the pensions, the NHS, universal credit, all of it will collapse. Now, obviously, it's not just millionaires who are leaving. There's a lot of ordinary people as well. But what kind of ordinary people are we talking about there? It's not ordinary people who are claiming welfare, not that that is particularly ordinary, but it seems to be becoming more so in this country. The people who are claiming welfare cannot leave this country because they're dependent on the state, so they will be staying. The people who are leaving, therefore, by definition, are productive citizens. They're people with a particular skill set that they know will enable them to build a life overseas. They're exactly the kind of people you don't want leaving the country. Okay, just like the millionaires, this is the next best thing you can have, and you don't want these people going either. But they are. And why is that? Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the economy, right? And I don't care if someone wants to show me some chart with some GDP figure about how everything's great, because it's not. Everyone knows it's not. Go and ask any young person in this country how they feel about their economic prospects, right? And they will let you know things are not looking good. House prices are ridiculously high. They have been for a long time. They feel genuinely out of reach for the vast majority of people. And if you compare the average earnings adjusted for inflation to the average house price adjusted for inflation, this is like the worst time ever since Victorian times that you could try and buy a house. That's how bad this is. We're talking about 150 years of degradation. So very, very bad. Why is that? Why is that happening? It's because there's too many people in the country. Right? It really is that simple. And why is there too many people in this country? It's because of mass immigration. It's not because of birth rates. It's not because of natural population increases. Our birth rate has been below replacement levels for about 50 years. If anything, without mass immigration, there should be loads and loads of spare houses around. House prices should be dirt cheap in this country, but they're not because of mass immigration. All of the population increase, and thereby the demand increase on housing, is artificial. It's been brought into this country. So that's really, really bad. At the same time, the job market is exceptionally bleak. It's really, really competitive, even for the most basic jobs. Why? Because there are too many people in this country. Too many young people. And I'll say this as well. I think a lot of employers have decided that it would be easier, more secure and cheaper to simply employ foreign labour. Perhaps they don't even have to train that foreign labour, which is even better, than it would be to employ a local native British person. So again, mass immigration is creating a massive frustration there. It's a big, big problem. And these aren't short-term problems either. I'm not talking here about the recent cost of living crisis that we've had over the past couple of years. I'm not even talking about that, because that would be a small speed bump that most people would logically reason that, okay, this is bad for a few years, but we're going to get past it. Everything's going to be okay. No, this is like a deep set, entrenched rot of just real fiscal hardship in this nation that a lot of young people don't see any way to get over. This isn't a speed bump. This is a mountain, right? They can either try and climb over the mountain, or they can just go somewhere where there isn't a bloody mountain. And guess what? That is exactly what they're doing. Now, for most people, they do have a job and they are paying taxes, and even that situation is incredibly bleak. Because paying taxes is like making a trade. I pay taxes and I expect either some kind of service or some kind of guarantee in return. Well, right now, we are paying the highest level of taxation since the Second World War. Not only that, our taxes are going to go up again next week in the November budget. But the level of service and the level of guarantee just keeps declining. It keeps getting worse. So the trade that you are making as a taxpayer is really just not a good one in this country. It's a lot better in some other places, and people are starting to realise that and thinking, well, I'll just go there then, right? And a big part of this is, we're spending money feeding the rest of the world. It's simply true. We hear now that it costs £15 billion a year to put illegal migrants up in hotels, right? That is an extraordinary amount of money. At the same time, once they are given asylum, which 85% of them are because they game the system correctly, 66% of them then claim welfare. So we're just in this absolutely god-awful situation of just paying for the rest of the world constantly. Britain is just used as a goddamn food bank. But look, it's not actually all just foreigners, right? Of course it's not. There are now English, Welsh, Scottish and Northern Irish people who are also gaming the system. Back in 2021, the number of people claiming welfare who didn't even have to seek work was about 1 million people. Well, fast forward 4 years, and that's up to 4 million people. You're trying to tell me that the number of people in this country who are so disabled that they cannot even search for work has quadrupled in the last 4 years. Of course it hasn't. People are gaming the system. And if you go and look at the official statistics, they'll be like, oh, it's a 0.2% fraud rate. Yeah, of course, whatever you say, right? Absolutely ridiculous. So why would the ordinary, hard-working British taxpayer want to stay, knowing that the more that he keeps forking out to the state, services aren't getting better for him, or for his family, or for his children. He is literally just subsidising the laziness of other people in the country. Alternatively, he could go somewhere else and simply not have to deal with that. What do you think they're going to do? Okay, look, let's just imagine for a moment that you've got a good job and you don't mind paying the high taxes for some reason. Well, the country itself is still broken. It's not like a high tax, high functioning country like Norway where, yes, you pay a lot in tax, but everything kind of works and people are happy. That's not what we have. Unfortunately, we have a high tax broken country. If you get injured or whatever and you go to A&E, you'll probably be sat in a queue for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours waiting to be medically treated. And I know that that's true because I have done it myself. It's horrible. It's grim. And I'll say this as well, when you're just walking through town and you're looking around and all the shops are boarded up except for perhaps a vape shop and maybe a phone repair shop, very suspiciously, and like 83 Turkish barbers. You're walking through your town and you're thinking, what the hell is going on? As long as you keep your eye line above 45 degrees and you just look at the buildings, it's like, oh yeah, this is England, this is quite nice. As soon as you come back down to street level, there's a gang of people sat there in the middle of the day drinking, and you have to cross the street to walk around them because they're not even speaking English and you've got no idea what's going on. That doesn't feel like home to a lot of people. So even if they've got a reasonably good job, and for some bizarre reason they're happy to pay the taxes, it still just doesn't feel like home, does it? So why wouldn't you leave? Again, you're not going to be able to hold on to these people when they have no sense of community or purpose or connection to this land. It's very, very simple. It's not just the economy either, is it? Because there's this growing sense of oppression that we live under in Britain. And I know that sounds like the language of the left, like I'm talking about, oh, you're oppressed, or who's your oppressor? But I really do mean it. Like, we're being oppressed by the British state. Free speech crackdowns, free thought crackdowns if they could, protest crackdowns. I mean, I learned just the other day that apparently they've hired thousands of people to monitor tweets of British people, making sure that they're not saying anything too negative about immigration, or they'll end up on a watch list. Well, I'm definitely going to end up on that watch list.
Civil servants are being advised on how to spy on your social media posts about immigration. If you say that you're annoyed about illegal immigrants being given houses in your town, or you're worried about the safety of women and girls, your messages could be deemed high risk. This is the new Resist framework that instructs civil servants to monitor posts for high-risk narratives that could adversely affect certain ethnic groups or new migrants. One of the examples it gives as potentially dangerous are local parents groups. They might cross the line from free speech to harmful rhetoric, or concerns about asylum seekers being given priority housing or benefits that locals have to wait years for. So just look at this today from the Daily Mail. The Mail reported today on a couple living in Newport in Middlesbrough, which is apparently Britain's poverty capital. So sorry to say that on air, anyone from Newport who's watching, but apparently 6 out of 7 kids are classed as living in poverty there. And this couple say that they're not happy that asylum seekers get more handouts than them, like free phones, free food and free accommodation. Is that dangerous to say? Might that stoke community tensions? What about highlighting the town in Surrey where the local council has earmarked £5 million for Afghans to get housing, while 2,500 people sit on the housing waiting list? What about people posting about the case of an Iranian small boat migrant guilty, a 15-year-old girl in Oxford? What about the story reported by The Telegraph about the asylum caseworker whistleblower who revealed that she was told to grant asylum to an Afghan man who had been caught exposing himself in a children's playground multiple times? Well, it turns out that the Cabinet Office has a team of 6,000 civil servants working in the Government Communications Service tasked with, quotes, stopping online disinformation, producing counter-narratives.
Now, here's the kicker. Everything that I've just spoken about, all of the economic stuff, could be overcome if there was a sense of national unity and national spirit left in this country. If people looked left and right and they saw people that they had a lot in common with, they were all English, I'm English, you're English, we live in England, we're in this together, and we've got to try and make our country better for the future and the future generations. If people had that spirit still, we could overcome all of these economic hurdles. But we don't. And why don't we have that spirit anymore? I think a big part of it, frankly, is mass immigration. England is now only about 65% English. And eventually the English are going to be a minority in this country, about 15 or 20 years. So you look left and right now at your neighbours and you don't see people that you share really that much in common with. So that sense of national unity and national spirit is gone. And this was done deliberately. This was done deliberately, specifically to the English, to degrade their identity as a people, shun it. You know, oh, the flag of St. George is racist. Oh, you're not English. Anyone can be English. Anyone can be British. Those kinds of ideas, extremely damaging. The idea that anyone can be British as long as they have a passport is so destructive to the psyche of people who are actually British, people who are ethnically British. They're either English, Cornish, Welsh, Scots, Northern Irish, whatever. Those people are the ones who suffer when you say that anybody can be British. As long as they've got a passport, they're just as British as you. Even if they arrived 5 years ago and the government has just handed them some documents, that's it, right? Doing that destroys the connection that a people have with a land and a nation. The person who's arrived here 5 years ago and the government has given them a British passport still feels, of course, a lot more connection to their homeland, whether that's India, Pakistan, or an African country or whatever. We are the ones that get separated from our ancestry and from our ethnic identity and our history, and that is extraordinarily damaging to the psyche of the people. Now, if English people and Scots and Welsh and Northern Irish don't feel any connection to the land and to their ancestors and to their history in this country, then of course they are going to leave. They've been told for so long that they don't belong to any group. Of course you don't belong to any group. You know, they've been made atomistic little individuals. And so they think to themselves, why would I stay? This is just an economic zone, right? Britain is just an economic zone. People can arrive here, work and be given a passport within a few years. It's just an economic zone. It's not an economic zone. It is our homeland that our ancestors and forefathers built for us. And we are only meant to be the custodians, passing it on to the next generation of English, Scottish, Irish and Welsh people. I want to add something on that last point, because a nation is its people. In fact, Elon Musk replied to a tweet of mine in which he said exactly this: a nation is its people. And he's totally correct. So what do you think happens to this nation when you start bringing people from the third world in their millions into Britain? What do you think happens to the character and the structure and the nature of Britain? It will become more third world. Not only is that going to happen in the future, it's already happening. You've already seen it. Look around your towns. Look at the kinds of shops that can survive. Look at the levels of corruption. Look at the levels of, unfortunately, very, very serious crimes that we have imported from other countries. The kinds of attitudes, social, cultural. It's changing. Britain is changing because the people in Britain are changing. They're not integrating, they're not assimilating. That's not happening. The overall multicultural slop project is just destroying what was left of Britain's heritage. You know this, you've seen this, but a lot of people aren't going to wake up to this until it's far too late to do anything about it. Right? Because, like I said, the English people are going to become a minority in this land in the near future. A really good example of this, by the way. People have been talking about it recently. The tons and tons of waste that was dumped illegally next to a river in England. Something like that would never have happened 30 years ago. But now we're seeing it, right? You're seeing waste and trash and litter. And this is just the start of the third worldification of Britain. It is going to get a hell of a lot worse. So again, some people don't want to live in a third world country and they're therefore getting out of Britain whilst they can. Look, I could talk about this for a very long time. I haven't even spoken about crime and specific types of crime that are making people feel unsafe and want to get out of the country. But if I start going on, this video is going to be 2 hours long. So I'll finish by saying this. Do I judge people for leaving the country in its time of need? I know a lot of YouTubers and Twitter commentators will say that they do and that they're very angry and they're not going anywhere and they're going to stay and fight for Britain. I don't see it in the same way. I don't judge those people for leaving. And I'll tell you why. I think it depends on the individual circumstances, right? Each man and woman has a hierarchy of responsibilities. And your country is on there, but it's not the absolute top thing. I think it should be your family first, and then your friends, and then your neighbours, and then perhaps your country. Now, you could rejig that order, but I think no matter how someone rejigs the order that I've just described, country is always going to come below family. So if you're sat there with a wife and 3 children, and you're living in London and you've got a good job, making, I don't know, 150,000 pounds a year, but you could also be making, good money in Monaco or another safe country, or a safer country and a happier country, Norway, wherever, Denmark. I'm not surprised that a lot of people feel like they have a duty to their family and to their children to give them the best quality of life that they can. And so who am I to judge them for making that decision? It just doesn't really make sense to me. At the same time, of course, if we're going to have any hope of turning this around, of fixing Britain, then we do need people to stay. But I don't think there's anything we can do in the near term, in the short term, that's going to turn Britain around and save it. I think Britain is fundamentally going to economically collapse, and then it is going to societally collapse. And why do I say that? Well, look, we're trillions in debt, and we can't balance the books. So every year we're borrowing hundreds of billions more. The gilt yields, the interest that we pay on that debt, is going up. Confidence in Britain is falling. The national structure is disappearing. And I just think that the next time we have a recession and there are a significant amount of job losses, there's going to be no coming back from it, because there's no manufacturing left, very little. There's no engineering, very little. It's all just email jobs. And ironically, we've brought in a lot of people to come and be workers in this country, and AI and robotics is going to replace a tremendous amount of them. So now you just have this even bigger burden on the welfare state. So that welfare state, and I'm talking the NHS, pensions, welfare, it eventually is all going to go. Now, is it all going to go? Or are they going to say, well, actually, just welfare, just universal credit, there's going to be no more benefits for people under 65 or whatever? Is that what's going to go? Are the pensions going to go? Is the NHS going to go? I don't know. But there's going to be some kind of pretty brutal realignment, because we're not running a fiscally sensible ship in Britain. And it's not going to end well. And what I really worry about is, once the welfare state breaks down and you've got people from all over the world living in this country, a lot of them with old ethnic rivalries, who, for the most part, are kept placid because they live in social housing on welfare, and they're unemployed and they don't do anything all day. They just sit around smoking weed. What happens when you take that away from them, but they're still in the country? I'm not going to pick on any particular group, but there are some groups who are vastly overrepresented in terms of being in social housing and claiming welfare and not working. What are those people going to do when all of that free money is turned off? How are they going to start funding their lifestyles? Are they going to start turning to crime? I don't know. And you can say the same for a lot of British people as well, who have just been sat around on welfare and benefits and in social housing. So look, I don't foresee a particularly bright future. I think something very, very bad is coming to this country. I don't know when exactly that's going to be. Don't know if it's going to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, but it just seems unavoidable at this point. No multi-ethnic society has survived without either having a very good economy, or at least a reasonably good improving economy, or an authoritarian leader who will just crack down on any dissent through violence. And we don't have either of those things. So when you lose those two things, you end up in a kind of Balkan situation. And then you start looking at things like the Bosnian War. Now that's a very bleak sort of picture. I'm not necessarily the ultra sort of civil war doomer type person that you see on YouTube. A lot of people talk about the inevitability of civil war. I think it's certainly possible, if I'm totally honest. But I don't put it as likely as some other people do. Anyway, look, do your best to prepare, because Britain is not in a healthy way. Ultimately, a lot of you should realise that you will not be able to depend on the state forever. try and figure out a means of you being able to look after yourself without state intervention, because it may not always be there, and just be generally a little bit prepared. I mean, what's the harm in having spare food, spare water? What's the harm in doing that? Seems kind of sensible to me. People have become a little bit too comfortable in this country, assuming that what has been will always be. And I'm just not 100% convinced that that's true anymore. This video is probably like, I don't know, half an hour long. I think this might end up being my longest ever political rant, because I usually try and keep them short. But yeah, kind of just unloading all of my bleak thoughts about Britain. Maybe I'll try and make the next video a bit more chirpy and positive to counterbalance it. Hopefully I don't lose too many of you as subscribers. If you're not subscribed, please do leave a like, comment and subscribe. That'd be fantastic. And otherwise I'll see you in a future video.